and things like that. But then as kind of small companies go, the job kind of changes over time, and I ended up for pretty much the past year and a half or so, I've been working on a project to design for basically designing a hypergolic thruster from start to qualification testing. And also one of the most interesting things is kind of over that time period, seeing how the company's changed and grown from like 3 or 4 people to around like 25 people now. So it's really interesting to kind of work with a startup over time and see how it changes over time.
Awesome. Henry, could you tell us about like Nexus Aurora and, you know, the whole journey that it's taken and your role in it?
Sure, yeah. So Nexus Aurora is a very unique case. It's a very interesting group. Basically, sometime back in March, a few people sent out something on Reddit saying that they wanted to put together a group to apply to the Mars City-State Design Competition, which is a competition that's run every year by the Mars Society. And I had nothing to do because it was quarantine and I was really bored, so I joined it. And originally it was just like 10 or so people all working on it together. We had to write a 20-page paper, but then 800 people joined. So we needed to we incorporated it. We set it up into a bunch of different teams. We started applying to different competitions. So I worked on, I was the head of their areography and areology team, which is Mars geology and geography. So I helped determine, I don't know, where we wanted to land primarily for the white paper that we wrote, and a bunch of other stuff. But I guess the reason why I'm here is because we won the competition. Like it was a couple weeks ago. So we presented at the Mars Society, and we won, which was really fun. But yeah, we can talk about that more later.
Awesome. Mary Claire, what did your internship entail?
Yeah, so the project I was working on is examining the atmosphere of Uranus using radiative transfer, which is a type of spectroscopy essentially. I was working directly under a mentor, Stacia Cook. She works at Columbia and AMNH. Essentially what I was doing is just a lot of coding, a lot of background reading, and essentially we were using past data, and then from the past data, once we got our feet under ourselves, we're continuing the project and using new data to analyze once we have had kind of all of the basis done. But it's a lot of coding and a lot of kind of reading past papers and seeing what information is out there essentially.
Great. Matthew, could you tell us about your internship?
Yeah, so I've been working on thermal controls at JSC. The main responsibility I've been doing is testing heat for different things, because a lot of components are pretty critical that they stay within certain heat ranges so you don't damage them or pose any hazards to astronauts or otherwise. So I've been designing simulations and running tests on different things heat related. One thing is a lunar core sample device that extracts samples, and then they're looking to heat those samples. And so I'm testing how much heat exactly we need in a heater to get it where we want.
Cool. And Sarah, could you tell us about your internship?
Sure. So the cool thing about Pathways is that you get to do 3 internships with NASA. So I've done one with CD4, which is in Mission Control Center, and I did back-end software development for them and a little bit of project management. I worked on preliminary development for a text messaging system for ISS for emergency situations to communicate with Earth. And then I worked in ER7 doing virtual reality development for astronaut training. And then I worked in ER6, which is the spacecraft software group. And I actually just signed with Graduate Pathways with them to continue working on the project I've been doing with them, which is spooky. But yeah, I'm building artificially intelligent user interfaces for astronauts.
Super neat. Okay, so y'all have already talked about pretty much what your internship entailed. So how did you manage to go about getting this internship? And Danny, we'll start with you.
I mean, it was relatively simple. Just sent in an application and did an interview, and yeah, that was pretty much it.
Henry?
So I guess mine was very simple too, and I guess might appeal to some people because it was a lot easier. It was just people on Reddit, and I guess there was sort of a little application process. Like you had to say a little bit about yourself, say like that you're at least a university student. Um, but it was very meritocratic in the sense that it was like your position was entirely determined by how much time you put into it. So we had a lot of professional engineers, a lot of postdocs, but the people who had serious jobs in aerospace were kind of the worst because they had other things to be doing. So they didn't really contribute at all. So most of the people who had the higher up sort of positions were graduate students for the most part, but there was no real application, which was nice.
Okay, Mary Claire?
Yeah, so how mine was a bit complicated. Barnard has a summer research institute every summer, and through that you get around $4,000 of funding for the summer, but you have to reach out to a mentor in any STEM field. So I essentially cold emailed my mentor and said, hey, this is what I do, here's my resume, I'm really interested in doing what you're doing. I have funding for the summer, and I'd love to work with you. And she emailed me back, and we met to kind of more talk about like what the summer would look like. But then unfortunately COVID hit, and the Summer Research Institute pulled their funding. But then I got funding through my mentor's NASA grant. But it was a little more informal.
Okay, Matthew, how did you get your internship?
So I think when applying to NASA, there's a few different options. I know there's intern.nasa.gov. You can just go on that website and apply. What I did specifically was USA Jobs, which is another one of their standard sites for applying. And specifically, I did the Pathways program, just like Sarah. And I heard about this through CSI, or specifically one of the missions, which was Micro G. They sent a notice to some of the people working on Micro G. So if you're in on some of the competitions, you might get to hear about stuff that you might not have heard otherwise. And they said, I think there was like a 2-week or like 1-week window, and they'd accept X amount of applications. So just by being on top of that and knowing when that window is, you actually have a pretty good chance because they cut things off pretty soon, and they turn things into an interview and so on. So yeah, just I recommend if you're interested in the Pathways program, looking up details on that.
Cool, and Sarah, is it the same for you or was it slightly different?
Yeah, I would say Matthew's probably better qualified to talk about it since I went through it a couple of years ago and he's done it more recently. But I would also just emphasize what Matthew said, that you need to apply early when it opens. The application, it opens twice a year and there will be one in the spring, and you need to be one of the first people to apply because there is a cutoff. Like you can't wait till the last minute. But yeah, just echo everything Matthew said.
Okay, great. In terms of the application process, was there anything, and we'll go around of course, was there anything that you felt worked particularly well, and how did you prepare for interviews and writing the application in general? So Danny.
At least for the kind of position I did, which was very kind of hands-on and in propulsion design, that kind of thing. The best thing you really can do to prepare is have some kind of project experience, which I mean CSI is great for, because mostly what they're going to ask about in the interview and what they're excited to see on your resume is that you have, first of all, an interest in whatever they're trying to do, and also in interviews, they just love asking about an actual hands-on project that you've done, what kind of calculations you did, why you made whatever design choices you did, that kind of stuff. So yeah, hands-on stuff.
Awesome. Henry?
Yeah, this wasn't a traditional internship type thing, so there wasn't really an application. There was no interview. The application was like a Google form that took me 5 minutes. So yeah.
Mary Claire?
So mine was a bit informal since I did cold email her, but something I didn't do that I wish I'd done to prepare is to start way earlier, because I was also applying to other REU programs, and I pushed everything towards the end, which really stressed me out. It ended up working in the end, but I'd recommend not doing what I did.
Matthew?
So I think, at least in what I did, the first cutoff is the resume. So just making sure you don't sell yourself short on the resume. Don't lie, because it'll probably be hard to explain yourself out of that during the interview, or when you actually get the job, if you do. But I think just as early as you can, start thinking about things that you're interested in, not for the resume, but just things that you think are worth your time, so that you'll end up putting on there. And then when it comes to the interview, if you've been honest about the resume process, it'll probably be pretty easy to talk through the things that you've worked on, because you'll know it inside and out because you've been there. And that's what will then take you through the next filter if you go through the interview, just understanding your projects and having put time into them. So like one question I think I was asked was like, what was one problem you encountered and how did you fix it? Which is something you'll probably hear that a lot of times. And just thinking of examples beforehand of things you did personally to fix things that went wrong, things you did well, and just kind of telling a story anytime you get asked a question. Don't just kind of give them an answer. Also talk them through what you were thinking, start to finish, to kind of paint a picture of how you think.
Sarah? Was there anything other than that?
Yeah, so my process was the same as Matthew's, and then it was a resume and then an interview. But something that I did before that interview that was very helpful for me was I went through my resume and I looked at every project that was relevant, and I made sure that I could talk about it for 2 minutes and why it was relevant to why I would want to work there. And then additionally, what he said, I would just echo again, that it's important to be able to talk about how you interact with other people in a work environment and what you bring to the table in that aspect. Because at least for Pathways, they care a lot about your leadership experience and also that you're able to work productively in a team.
Awesome. So next question. What motivated you to apply to your particular position, and how has your experience changed your career aspirations? So Danny?
Honestly, I applied like back sophomore year, so I was mostly just applying to a lot of different propulsion companies. Mostly I wanted to do an internship with rocket engines because I was pretty interested in that, and I obviously still am. But yeah, it's really kind of been quite a long journey since then. My job's changed a lot, and yeah, how it has changed my career aspirations. I've kind of gotten a lot more interested in working at a smaller company rather than someplace larger, because I found that it's really exciting to be able to kind of own a project completely from start to finish, and be able to work with a lot of different, basically all different aspects, from modeling and analysis to design and testing of a project all the way through. So yeah, that's been kind of the main takeaway from it.
Cool. Henry?
Well, wait, which question was this?
How
Five.
has your experience changed career aspirations?
Well, I definitely think that presenting at like the Mars Society convention was very interesting, because I got to see a lot of people working at like JPL in particular in the planetary sciences that were presenting very similar material as to what my presentation was on. So I guess it's convinced me to sort of look to planetary sciences, atmospheric sciences, perhaps, which I really hadn't considered before. I used to be an aspiring mechie person who wanted to do rocket engines. So I kind of made a big shift.
Mary Claire?
So I came into college knowing I was going to be an astronomy major essentially. But what I didn't know was kind of the field, because there's a bunch of subfields. After kind of taking a few classes, I realized like, hey, I'm really into exoplanets, astrobiology, and to some extent planetary science. And why I applied to AMNH specifically is because one of my friends works at a Brown Dwarf research group there, had a great experience, and she kind of pointed me towards Stacia, who she said was really cool, really interesting. So I was like, cool, awesome, great. And through kind of what I've done, I've realized that like planetary science is very fun. And I knew kind of going into college that I'd want to pursue a PhD, but now I'm kind of more sure about that. And I know that I want to do something more planetary sciencey or even exoplanety. And kind of how my experiences changed my career aspirations, it just kind of confirmed what I knew kind of entering my sophomore year at least. But it's been really fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Matthew, what motivated you to apply? How has your experience changed your career aspirations?
I think the main reason for application was just that I was familiar with NASA and wanted to give it a try if things lined up correctly, and thankfully they did. I think as I think about career aspirations, I don't think I'm there yet in knowing if this is exactly what I want to keep doing. I think as some people have mentioned a bit, it's good to explore other options and compare. Like I think it would be really good to see what the industry is like compared to NASA, which is a government organization, and see kind of if I can see myself better in one area. Because I've heard a lot of things, pros and cons both ways. But I do think definitely at the very least, it's given me some good understanding of what mechanical engineering is in a career and what to expect, and kind of thinking about what to focus on more. And I do think a lot of the project experience that you have the opportunity to do through things like CSI applies pretty well.
Awesome. Sarah?
Okay, so I actually applied to Pathways kind of on a whim. My financial aid package had not come through yet, and I needed to find something to do for a semester. And Pathways has you take a semester off of school. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. I didn't really know anyone who'd done the program before, but I just applied and like kind of hoped for the best. And then I ended up getting accepted the same week I got my financial aid package. And I took like a leap of faith and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna take the semester off anyways. And I went and I did it, and it worked out really well for me, clearly. And it's like completely changed my career path. I'm now applying to PhD programs right now, actually, for computer science, focusing on what I'm going to be working on at NASA. And I will like say though, it's worked really well for me, but if you are thinking about a career in aerospace and you're not 100% sure, there are like alternatives to Pathways, particularly USRA. It's a similar program, but it's only one semester. And so it kind of gives you more of like a taste of what it's like to work at a place like NASA. So that's definitely something to look into applying to if you're looking for internships. But yeah, it's definitely changed my entire life.
Awesome. Okay. So what is one thing you wish you knew before you started your internship? Going into it. Danny?
I don't really know if I have an answer for this. Can we pass on me here?
Fair. Henry?
I think one thing that I wish I knew is that I enjoy coding in Python. I've sort of been super adverse to CS. I don't know why. I guess I just like to be contrarian. But data science is really fun, and it's really useful in a wide range of places, including planetary science. So.
Awesome. Mary Claire?
Yeah, something I wish I knew is that I'm not bothering my mentor when I ask questions. At first, I was really like nervous of her thinking like, oh, I'm not cut out for it. Like, clearly, if I didn't know this, like, what am I doing here? But then I realized like it's taking forever to do all this because I'm not asking her questions. And immediately, like once I kind of got over like not wanting to ask questions. Everything just went way smoother. I figured out problems way faster, and now I kind of like message her like whenever I'm stuck, and that kind of gets everything going really fast. So I'd recommend, like, if you're worried about like your mentor, like thinking, like just ask some questions. That's what they're there for. But yeah.
Great. Matthew?
What Mary said was exactly what I was thinking. I just think that's a very good point. I guess to expand on that, it kind of depends on where you're working, but quite often people outside of your mentor or people in different areas of focus are usually also available to talk. Definitely maybe at least ask someone who you're closely familiar with if that's an option where you are. But for example, at NASA, most people, even in different departments, different divisions, whatever, are more than happy to talk, answer questions, or even just connect. And that can also lead to future opportunities. If you want to come back another time, or if you're trying to connect, maybe they know someone who knows someone, that kind of thing. Just getting to know other people as well, I think. So I would have loved to have known earlier, just that often, even outside of your mentor, there's a lot of great people who are more than willing to have a conversation.
Great. Sarah?
So I wish that I'd known that qualifications aren't what you think they are. I held a really high expectation for myself of what I thought I needed to have to get this internship and even to work there. So once I was there, I was so worried. I'd only taken up to AP, and I just didn't think I was going to be able to keep up with like software developers at NASA. But I think it's really important to remember that when you're going into an internship, everyone there knows that you're a college student and you're learning, and you're there because you're passionate about what you're doing, and they don't expect you to know everything. And kind of on top of that, especially at NASA, when I was doing stuff in mission control, it wasn't even in languages that I already knew. They have their own entirely different language that they do for backend or for front end. So yeah, I would just emphasize that it's not everything what's on your resume when you get there and when you're applying.
Great. So for those people who needed letters of recommendation, I'm not sure which people that is, like, what is the best way to get letters of recommendation? Because that's a thing I know a lot of people stress about, and it ends up being a lot more of a hassle than you may think. I don't know, Danny, if you needed one. Henrietta.
I mean, I can talk about it, but I didn't need one for this, but I've gotten letters of recommendation for, which I just have asked for once for grad school. So best thing to do for that, I found is, I mean, talk to your professors. Like, even if you don't have questions, go to their office hours, just to ask about, I don't know, if you want to ask about projects you're working on personally, something like that. Just go get to know them. Also, obviously, doing research with a professor is definitely a great way to get them to get to know your skill set and work with them. So yeah, just literally get to know your professors.
Mary Claire or Henry, whoever would like to speak on this.
I can speak a bit because I've gotten them in the past. Ask earlier rather than later, just because professors do have like a lot on their plates and they have a bunch of students who ask them for letters of rec. So it just makes the process much smoother, because I have like stayed up panicked like the night before something was due, waiting for my professor to put it in. So ask them earlier rather than later. If you're a freshman and you're really worried, like you've only been here for a semester, and you're worried about a letter of rec, just find a professor who maybe you did well in the class. I really recommend going to office hours, like Danny said. It gets the professor to know you more than just kind of like a letter grade. And they can definitely speak more to your skills and strengths and give you a better letter of rec.
I can add something as well too, if that's okay. Yeah, also, aside from asking early, I would continue to remind them occasionally. So whenever I'm asking for letters of rec right now for PhD programs, and every 2 weeks I email Steve and I say, hi, Steve, just a reminder, like we should talk about this so that you can write your letter of rec for me. Just because once again, like professors have so much on their plates that you just have to make sure that it doesn't like fall off of their radar. Just because it is such a large part of your application for so many different things.
Anybody else want to speak on that? Grand. Okay. A very interesting question that's pertinent for, I guess, a lot of freshmen. What is your guys' general advice for freshmen who know they're interested in aerospace, but will probably have a pretty difficult time finding an internship or research because, like, especially because of coronavirus times? So, Danny, you want to start?
Yeah, so a couple things as a freshman. I know as a freshman, the internship I got was working at NASA. So NASA actually does have internships targeted specifically for like first years and that kind of thing, which I would definitely recommend looking into because, yeah, to be real, it's often pretty hard to get an internship at a larger company as a freshman because they're generally looking for upperclassmen. And if you actually end up not being able to find research or an internship, that's definitely not at all the end of the world. Like definitely a lot of people that I know did not have an internship their freshman year, and they're doing completely fine. So I would recommend though, if you don't, definitely work on, I always recommend working on a project or something because the more projects you've worked on, first of all, you learn a lot and have fun doing it, but also it gives you something that you can discuss later when you're looking for other jobs or internships or whatever.
Cool. Henry?
Yeah, I definitely just echo that, I guess. I mean, most of the reason why I did this internship that I did is because the one that I actually wanted was canceled. So I would say one thing that is important is if you can't find the internship that you want, or you can't find one at all, especially if you're a freshman, I guess just don't just sit around. Like it's an accumulation of advantage type thing. So I would definitely encourage doing a project, even if it's like a completely, yourself. You're just doing something for fun. If you have a cool piece of code to show at your next, for your next job or something like that, it's an accumulation of advantage. So you want to be constantly working on something.
Mary Claire?
Yeah, so I ran into this my freshman year where my parents wanted me to stay at home, so I couldn't apply to anywhere that wasn't in the Chicago area. And I ended up just kind of working as a cashier at a zoo. And then also on the side, I volunteered with a project at my local planetarium. So definitely it is 100% not the end of the world if you don't have something lined up. But also just kind of develop your skills. Like either if you don't know coding, you want to learn, that's a great time to learn it. Just make sure you're kind of like not twiddling your thumbs, I guess, but it's totally going to be fine. Everything's going to work out in the end.
Grand. Matthew?
One thing that I would recommend, I did this my freshman year, is particularly look at universities for research opportunities over the summer. Quite often there's paid ones, or at least they'll give you a stipend for like housing and everything. So you can explore those opportunities. The way you get those is, at least what I did, was I worked on something over the school year. And then by the end of the year, I talked with the professor and questioned if there was availability to keep working over the summer. And so often if you can get that going during the year, you can turn that into an opportunity later on through the university. If it's not here at Columbia, then maybe other universities could have openings, and they have programs that are designed for underclassmen. You just have to kind of look around and talk with professors and find if you can find projects that are closely related to what you know, then that can be a great approach, because you'll be able to talk about it and show some real interest. Aside from that, I would say, for example, if I was not able to do that or find a internship in exactly what I wanted, I would be more than willing to go outside of exactly what I'm interested in. So for example, since I'm studying mechanical engineering, I would maybe explore, if I couldn't find otherwise, like a traditional mechie internship, maybe something in like a machine shop that's more kind of manual labor, but still something where you can learn a lot of relevant skills. Or even failing that, just the traditional job, I think, will just teach you some basic stuff about working in a career and how to handle a job and manage your time.
Great. Sarah?
So hard going last. Everyone says everything I plan to say. So yeah, I would just say going out of industry is more than fine. My first year summer, I worked at a startup that had absolutely nothing to do with aerospace. And just being able to talk about the software development project that I did there was very helpful for interviews for Pathways and also other stuff that I've done since then. So yeah, I would just recommend finding something where you're working in the general area or of study that you plan to follow. And even if you can't get an internship, that's okay. Like, for instance, I lead the suits mission at CSI, and I think working on stuff like that can be really, really good over the summer. So just those project-based ways to keep yourself busy.
Great. Also, want to mention that if you guys do have any questions at any point in time, or you've been saving questions, just send it in the chat and we'll get to it. We definitely have plenty of time. So yeah. The next question is similar to the previous one, but for people who have minimal technical experience and no prior relevant internships, what is the best advice you could give to them trying to get engineering internships and the like? Danny?
I mean, first of all, do your best to get technical experience, and this is speaking mostly as a mechanical engineer, because technical experience is very important. So you're going to want to do projects on your own, or join one of our CSI clubs where you'll get plenty of technical experience. But then also, if you are applying without technical experience, I'd say making sure you really show that you're interested and willing to be engaged. Because one of the things that they are often really looking for is showing that you've done your research into wherever you're working and that you're really going to be interested and an engaged member of the team, rather than someone who might really know what they're doing, but doesn't really care about the work they're doing, doesn't really want to learn.
Great. Henry or whoever would like to speak on it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. Join CSI missions, get a lot of technical experience. I guess also maybe don't apply, like if you're a freshman and you don't have a lot of technical experience, don't just apply to like the SpaceX website or the NASA like interns.gov or whatever. Like that's not going to go well. You should probably look at smaller perhaps startups. Maybe startups seem like they're a lot more willing to take on people with slightly less technical experience, but are just like passionate about aerospace. So I guess just look for things that are maybe a little bit more unorthodox. But of course, something unorthodox is perfectly acceptable if you're a freshman or even a sophomore. Just, it's accumulation of advantage. You do that first, rather unorthodox internship, and then that will lead you to better and better places.
Great. Mary Claire?
I can only really speak to this on coding just because my job doesn't really have that many technical skills. But just kind of show a willingness to willingness to learn, and also if you have time between your internship or when you kind of interview and when you get your internship, you can say like, here are the steps I'm going to take to try and learn this skill if it's something you can do remotely. So I didn't have as much experience as Python as I'd wanted. So I just said, hey, I'm going to be doing these to prepare, and then that was enough, and then just be ready to learn on the fly if you need to.
Great. Matthew?
So I think if you're lacking in technical experience, it will, I think it needs to be understood that it'll be kind of difficult to find something, which it's not to say it's impossible at all, but I think you just need an understanding that you're going to be up against a bunch of people who do have some technical experience. So my recommendation is to prioritize quality over quantity, because, and I kind of learned this from experience in my freshman year, sending out a ton of resumes when you don't have very much technical background is not going to look very attractive because all they see is the resume and that resume won't have that much on it. So I would recommend finding out opportunities, as I think Henry kind of mentioned, smaller ones, this will probably be better. And really getting to know like a specific project through maybe their website or their postings or something like that, and trying to contact the person who's involved in that and looking for an opportunity in that kind of way, in really getting to know a few, and maybe through the cover letter you can get this across. But rather than sending out maybe 50 resumes, put together like 5 genuine, like, here's my thoughts on your project, here's what I can do or what I'm working on that's in some way connected a little bit, even if it's not very technical in what you know. And I think that is as at least a little bit better. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, so I would recommend going to career fairs that Columbia hosts and actually just like genuinely talking to the people there instead of going to like, I don't know, the IBM booth and waiting in line so you can get your like 30 seconds. Maybe go to one of the tables that doesn't have a lot of people there and get to know what they really do. I think forming that personal connection and showing interest goes a long way. And additionally, I'm just going to advocate for research. I think it's really, really great. It's one of my favorite things I do at Columbia. And if you talk to professors that teach your classes, if you engage with them, go to their office hours, talk to them about their work and show that you care about it, chances are if you talk about researching with them, they might say yes.
Awesome. Okay. And the last question that I have on here before we can, take more questions, people can unmute and ask. So what are the best places to look for internships? And do you typically like apply to many things, or do you try to focus down on a few? Danny?
So the best places to look for internships really depends on what you want to do. Like, for example, I was obviously interested in rocket engines, and so I really looked and kind of surveyed the field of what's out there, looked at all like the different small launch companies and satellite providers, where do they get their propulsion systems. So you really want to look at the industry that you're interested in going into. Obviously, NASA does pretty much all of aerospace. So if you're interested in aerospace, there are big companies, NASA, Boeing, ULA, but if you want to try something smaller, you're going to have to kind of look around. Honestly, like Twitter can often be a good thing for that. You find one company and it's going to recommend other related startups. And then applying to one place or a lot. As Matthew said, I definitely, like, if you find yourself sending out hundreds of resumes, you probably want to stop and take a look at what you're doing, because first of all, if you're doing that, you're going to probably be applying to places you won't really want to end up working. And I'd recommend, like, if you're going to work somewhere, I would definitely not recommend going somewhere you're really not going to enjoy. I'd probably prioritize just taking a job near you and working on a project rather than that. And then also, you really do want to do your due diligence on wherever you're applying, contact even the people that work there. Yeah, as Matthew said, quality over quantity is really important.
Great. Henry, do you have anything to add?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I highly recommend looking for research opportunities. And the way I sort of go about it is I literally just pick a university that I like, and I go to the department that they have that I like, and I look at the faculty members. And I go through every single faculty member, and I look for ones that are either in research groups that I'm particularly interested in, or ones that have some like vague connection to Columbia. because you will find that if they went to undergrad at Columbia or something like that, they'll be a lot more responsive to your emails because they'll kind of like feel bad for you. I'll also say that like it's definitely what Matthew and Danny said. It's definitely like quality over quantity. I remember freshman year I applied to like 80 internships. Half of them I didn't even want, and if I don't even want them, like they know that I don't want them, and I have no technical experience anyway, so it was just completely pointless. Whereas if you find a faculty member at some university you want to work with, and you read their papers, especially professors really love this. If you like read their PhD thesis and you say like, oh my God, you know, on page 15, this topic was so amazing. I like the amount of times I've sent out emails and got no response. And then I send out one quality email where I say just a couple lines like that. And then I'll get a response in like 5 minutes because they'll see that a student actually cares. So sometimes you might be discouraged and want to just mass send out emails, but it's definitely quality over quantity.
Grand. Mary Claire?
Yeah, so I can only speak to research, obviously. But if you're looking for specific places to look and you want a more formal internship, and you're interested in any of the sciences, the National Science Foundation has these things called REUs, which are research experiences for undergraduates, that are specific programs at a bunch of universities. They have like astronomical sciences, biology, chemistry, just like a huge list. And essentially you can apply for them. That's a great thing to look at. The only thing is they are very selective and they are made for students who do not go to huge research universities like ours fortunately is. So it's kind of hard to get into those. Another place, if you're looking for a specific place, is the Department of Energy's National Laboratories. The only thing is it does have a requirement that you be a US citizen, but those have a bunch of engineering, science kind of internships, and they have kind of a more standard application. But yeah, I think I'm really going to echo what Henry said about sending a quality email. Like I mentioned my mentor's research and she responded back positively, obviously. So definitely making sure you're sending quality things. And especially as a freshman, it may be hard to get some of these internships just because like a bunch of people are applying for them. But just making sure like it's the best you can make it, and not to kind of half-ass it. But yeah.
Great. Matthew, Sarah?
I think aside from what's already been said, one thing I guess would be considering your network. And I know for definitely a lot of people that might not be something that you're very familiar with, or you might not necessarily have a network yet. But I guess just try and really think if there is anyone who you know, even like a family friend or maybe like a professor who you know really well, not necessarily asking them like for a job or for an internship, but just asking them like their thought process, because maybe they know a field pretty well and maybe they know, oh, this company is kind of in talks of some openings, and so I can just point you there, something like that. Kind of looking for, not necessarily seeking out directly an internship through your network, but just asking to be pointed in a good direction, I guess would be my point.
Yep. Sarah?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I also would say just be authentic through the process. Don't pretend to be something you're not. I feel like I had a lot of success when I went into interviews my first year, kind of being very straightforward about the fact that maybe I don't really have as much technical experience as they're looking for, but I really care about what they're doing there and I'm interested in the subject. And I think that they'll be more willing to work with you. So I guess that kind of plays in with the quality over quantity, is that like you should really pick places you like that maybe aren't like the big tech companies, but are geared towards specific things you find interesting, and make personal relationships with people in the process.
Grand. So that concludes the questions that we prepared. So we're opening up the floor to whoever has any questions. Thank you again for everybody speaking about your internship experiences. It was a very good learning experience. So yeah. If anybody has any questions, feel free to either send them in the chat or unmute yourselves.
I have a question.
Yep.
So I feel like when I did an internship back in high school, I felt it was like very nerve-wracking to try to get to know other people and like start a conversation. And I don't know if you have any tips for like how to make that like easier.
Yeah, so whoever wants to answer.
I can answer. I guess I can relate to that. I think just in general, not even within internship. Sometimes it's just hard to talk to people. That's okay. That's normal. I would say if you're trying to get to know people in your internship, I guess you can start that conversation off with completely non-internship related stuff. I think just think of it similar to like being at a new school or something like that, just talking about whatever you want. And then later that can build into like a more internship related connection. A lot of times you might hear that you want to like network with people. I would say don't try to like go up to people and say like, hey, here's my career, here's my path, I think we should connect. That obviously sounds weird. Instead, just take that to mean like make friends or get to know people, just as you would in any other context, I think. And I guess aside from that, just know that most other people are also more than willing to have another person to know at their internship, and to just don't stress about the intern reality of what's going on, and just treat them as kind of a normal person who you met anywhere else.
Yeah, I can respond too. So I would seek out any social groups that are in the internship. So for us, we have a Slack with all of the interns, and we also have something similar for everyone in our department. So joining those and really being responsive and involved in those conversations, and when events are planned in there, like going to the event, even if it makes you a little nervous, just like going is a big step towards getting to know other people in the department. Yeah, I've made so many of my closest friends just from going to those things in the Slack that were posted for the interns.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks y'all for coming. If you do have any questions after the end of this Zoom, feel free to send them over to spaceinitiative@columbia.edu or message us on social media, and you can reach out to specific people as you like. So yeah, thank you all for coming. I hope it was a very informative talk, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.